We are mocking the mock drafts on today's episode of Locked On 49ers. Dane Brugler's latest, one of the best draft analysts, has not one but two picks for the Niners in round 1 and round 2. Armand Mimbo and Walter Nolan. What do they look like as prospects for the San Francisco 49ers? Some hiring has been accomplished in the NFL, not by the 49ers. What does it all mean? Coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love and appreciate all the everydayers out there. Welcome to the new listeners. Please hit that subscribe button, the thumbs up. Let us know you're here on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. In today's episode of Locked On 49ers, brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. All right, Croc, we're getting into the mock drafts. It's mock draft season. It's draft season. I know there's still some teams playing. The Niners, not one of those this time in January. So we're getting started a little bit earlier with the draft process, and we're diving into some of these prospects. And so when we see some mock drafts, especially one that either tickles our fancy in some sort of way or comes from an analyst that we really trust. I think Dane Brugler is my favorite just because of the work he puts into the beast every year, and you get so much information from that publication, Dane Brugler of The Athletic, and he dropped his mock draft 2.0, and it's a 2-round mock draft. So a couple of picks for the San Francisco 49ers. In round 1, he has offensive tackle Armon Mimbo out of Missouri going to San Francisco at number 11, and then at number 43, round 2, Walter Nolan, defensive tackle from Ole Miss. And so we dove into the tape, and let's mock this mock draft, Croc. What did you see when you threw on the offensive lineman? And first of all, Dane Brugler, loved that he went back-to-back. O-line, D-line, we've been talking about it. I like it in theory. What about the specific players in Mimbo and Nolan? Let's start with Armand Membou. He's been playing right tackle most recently for Missouri in the SEC. Played a lot of ball, even though he's still, I think, a junior, early entry into the draft process.
Well, one thing that really kind of excites me about watching the film is you start to notice some of the other players on those teams, and watching Missouri, Burden, number 3, that receiver, is pretty damn good. I'm like, yeah. I know the 49ers are not going receiver at all. It's not even a thought for them that high in the draft, but Luther Burden, the third, like that guy,
I've been saying
damn good. And
if the 49ers last year at 31 would have taken a lineman, I think a lot of people have Luther Burden because he's a Kyle Shanahan wide receiver through and through, going in the first round this year instead. I don't think wide receiver is the path for the San Francisco 49ers this year, but Burden could go in that area for sure. But Armand Membou, 6'3", 320 pounds is what I'm looking at that he is listed.
I like that you brought up his height and weight and I'm pretty sure we'll get the arm length measurements on him soon as well, so that'll kind of let you know where they may have him. Again, you said he's a guy that played right tackle, but to me, everything about him said guard. Like everything. Like when you're watching him, that's literally my first note. Looks like a guard. Like he looks like a guard, moves like a guard. One thing that was interesting, kind of trying to understand what Kyle Shanahan wants in his guards, and this was something that we questioned even with Aaron Banks when he was coming out of Notre Dame. It's like, he doesn't move as well in space. And it took a few different games for me to start to see Membou reaching the next level on some of his blocks and getting some good blocks and kind of hanging on to those guys there. But ultimately, I didn't think that he looked like a great athlete. Is that something that you saw? There's more. I have a lot more notes on him, but that was one of the things that kind of jumped out. Not a great athlete, looks more like a guard.
He looked like a guard just when you first see him. He's like, well, he's built like a guard. He's wide. He's got the sand in the pants, right? We talk about the bubble. He's got the power bubble going on. He's a thick player, doesn't look like the longest player. So immediately you're like, okay, what's the arm length measurements? Will be huge for him, whether some teams have him at tackle, some teams have him at guard, or just everybody has him at guard, right? So that'll be pretty key for him in the draft process. I thought he looked athletic getting out on the move, but he was playing tackle, so it wasn't like he was pulling a lot. But when you saw him out on the move, he was able to hit moving targets, and he was able to get out and block people on the second level. And I did like that, which was very guard-like with the way he moved in that regard. Sometimes as a pass blocker, though, some extreme rush. Look, he faces a lot of good speed rushers in the SEC too. There's some guys that could kind of get on him pretty quickly around the corner, and so sort of in reverse. And he showed some athleticism at times, and then sometimes it looked like he could have been susceptible to some speed rushers, but that could be an arm length thing too as well. That edge was softened a little bit because of potentially a lack of length for him. Really good prospect, I think. As far as pick number 11 for him, I don't see him as a top 11 type of a prospect. I would probably put actually Mimbo and Nolen in a very similar category of probably late first, early second round prospects. And so I think the value on Nolen in the second round is kind of nice. The value on drafting someone like Mimbo in the first round, I don't love. And on top of probably projecting him to be in like if I watched, I'm like, okay, this guy could be a Pro Bowl guard. Am I drafting him top half of the first round to be an offensive tackle in the NFL? Maybe not, probably not. And even though he could stick a tackle in the NFL, I think it could be a starter there. But he was a right tackle as well. And what it might give 49ers fans a headache to think about it this way, but I think it's possibly likely the 49ers are replacing their left tackle before they replace their right tackle currently too. And I think a lot of people when they do mock drafts, they're like, oh, replace Colton McKivitz at right tackle. And so they're looking for a right tackle prospect. I don't look at it that way. Like, it would be great if the 49ers upgrade at right tackle. Sure. So if the guy can play right tackle, that's good. But I'm looking at a left tackle just as much as I'm looking at a right tackle. And in reality, rookie season, that player is probably plugging in for Aaron Banks, who leaves via free agency at left guard as a starter before he bounces out to either side at tackle. So from that regard, Mimbo could come in and play right away and be awesome as, say, left guard for the 49ers as a rookie. Is he a future offensive tackle, left or right? He played right tackle in college. He didn't play left tackle. So for a lot of reasons there, I don't love him as the 11th pick in the draft. And some people scoff at the idea of value in the draft because you really don't know what players are and what's value if you don't get a good player, if it's the wrong position, whatever, right position, wrong player, right position. The 11th pick in the draft, J.J. Watt went 11th. Micah Parsons was the 12th pick in the draft a few years ago, right?
And maybe was the tackle, I believe, for the Chargers, was he 11th?
No, he was 13, so I think 11 must have been
Fields?
Devontae Smith. Or Fields.
No, Fields. Smith, I think, went 10th.
Oh, right, because the Giants got leapfrogged with the interdivision trade, right? So it was the Cowboys went back from 10 to 12 with the Eagles. The Eagles went up to 10 to get Devontae Smith and jumped ahead of the Giants because the Giants were going to take Smith, and then the Giants were mad, so they moved out, and the Bears came back up to get Fields at 11. Then it was Parsons at 12, and then it was the offensive tackle for the Chargers at 13. That's how it went. Yeah. But I mean, we're talking about big time players in that spot. Pick 11. I want J.J. Watt. I want Micah Parsons for drafting defensive linemen. I want Aldon Smith was the 11th pick in the draft, wasn't he? No, was Patrick Willis the 11th pick in the draft?
I thought he went top 10.
I might be getting him confused. Either Willis or Aldon Smith were 7 and 11, I think, in the draft. But anyway, that's the type of prospect I want with the 11th pick. I don't want a guy that's like, maybe he's guard, but a pretty good guard. I'm not looking for that at pick 11. Now, maybe in the end, it would be a really nice pick and a really good player. But man, at this point, sitting here in January, I'm thinking, can we get a Hall of Fame can we get a defensive player of the year at pick 11? You know what I mean? I'm still hoping for something like that. So Armand Membou, nice prospect. Is he like a decade-long Pro Bowl perennial offensive tackle that you can't pass on at pick 11? No, I don't think so. And to me, he looks more like a late first round pick, early second round type of a guy. He probably, just early, and we're early in the process here, and we'll stack the board here officially on Locked On 49ers, Croc. But I would put him in a similar category to the Arizona tackle / guard that the Packers took in the first round, late round 1 last year. I'm blanking on his name right now. Every time see, this is what happens in the draft process for me. I'm at capacity, right? My memory card is full. Yeah. So the old names have to leave if I put new names in, and I have to put 250 new prospect names in the old computer. And that means old names have to disappear. And I'm already blanking on last year's draft prospects, even though I could tell you everything about them, 7 months ago.
But so Mimbo, a few more notes that I have on him. His pass set, he's like more of a vertical pass set guy. I didn't see that like nice, pretty Trent Williams kick step, which Trent Williams has one of the prettier kick steps, pass sets in the NFL, but didn't quite see that. More of a vertical kind of if you can think of maybe like a basketball player kind of shuffling backwards. It was kind of more of that type of kick step, but did think that he had good feet. I thought he moved well in short areas. But once he had to kind of really get going, like, when you can envision Mike McGlinchey in your head moving out into space and like running 40 yards down the field, right? Like that was kind of freakish stuff for a tackle, but just how natural in space it looked movement wise. I didn't quite get that from Mimbo. I thought he kind of lost his balance a little too much for my liking. When you put on 3 different games and in each game, there's instances where he's losing balance. That was something that just kind of, just a little alarming. Like, why are you losing your balance? Like, what is the issue with that? So, but I thought he handled strength well. You talked about speed to power. Thought he handled that well. And again, one of my later notes, just not a great athlete, but can move a little. So it almost was like when you're talking about just putting the film on, the next prospect you're talking about, if you would have told me that those two guys are flipped and that guy was more like someone you're talking about 11 and Mimbo is more of someone that you're talking about second round, I would be like, oh, okay, yeah, I see that.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I think we see Armand Mimbo very similarly. And I will say, as much as I love Dane Brugler as an analyst, he's a little bit of on an island with Mimbo. That's like one of his pet guys. You don't see Mimbo in a lot of first-round mocks, and you certainly don't see him in the top 15 of a lot of mock drafts. Maybe that'll start to happen more and more, and maybe he's hearing from teams that they really love Mimbo, but that's like one of his favorite guys that he's higher on than everybody else. So that's why he shows up in Dane Brugler's mock. We haven't seen him a lot in any other mock drafts at least as high as where the 49ers are picking at number 11. Okay, next, Walter Nolan, defensive tackle from Ole Miss. Our scouting notes there, and some coach hires coming in. Ben Johnson to Chicago, another defensive coordinator off the board for the San Francisco 49ers, potentially if they were looking at Jeff Ulbrich as a candidate there. So some hiring needs to start happening pretty soon. We'll get into all that next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Gametime. Love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, comedy shows. One of my favorite memories this year was attending a concert, and I decided, you know what? I had tickets to that for like months and months and months in advance, and they added a second night. I liked the first night so much. Went on Gametime, got half-price tickets for night number 2, and went back by myself because I liked it so much, and I got a great deal on Gametime. If it wasn't for Gametime, I wouldn't have gone to see that concert for the second night in a row. The energy and excitement was awesome, unforgettable. Sporting events too, going to Giants games, getting fantastic deals on tickets to go see a ball game and bring my son with Gametime was phenomenal. So now Gametime makes it even easier to get tickets to your favorite events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets like you might if you're going to, say, an NFL game and there's a 60,000 seat arena that you're trying to find tickets for. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right. The second pick in Dane Brugler's mock draft 2.0, second rounder, number 43 overall for the San Francisco 49ers was defensive tackle Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. I've seen him listed at 6'4", 290. I've seen him listed at 6'3", 305. I tend to think that's the way it goes. And if you look at those, those college roster listings, take off an inch and add 10, 15 pounds. You'd probably be a little bit closer to a lot of guys, what their actual height and weight is, because you can change your weight a lot before the combine, but you're not going to get much taller. And a lot of these guys weren't quite as tall as their listed heights. For example, Eric Crocker, listed 6'2", 6'1" and 3/4. I mean, 6 feet and 7/8, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like roughly 6'1". It's not 6'2".
Yeah, but you're
now the interesting thing with it though is probably with him, myself, when you see us in person, like most people ask me in person, like, oh, how tall are you? Like 6'2". So like that's what it looks like, and it probably for him looks like he's 6'4". But once the NFL gets a hold of you and they measure you, it will be your true measurement to a T.
And the thing you can control, if you were 290, get yourself over 300 pounds. So yeah, 6'3 and an eighth and 305. I think that's probably a closer guess to what Walter Nolan will be in the NFL. Although ankle's a little skinny on Walter Nolan, even though he's got some size up top. Here's my short version of the scouting report on Walter Nolan. Croc. I bet he was like a high school running back. He plays defensive tackle like a running back. He's run through arm tackles on his way to the quarterback. Explosive, really good athlete. I think production is up and down, but you were saying, like, he's a guy that might sneak into the end of the first round because when you're a juiced up athlete, defensive tackle, if he's a 300 pounder, and he transferred from Texas A&M, I believe, to Ole Miss. He's been on the radar for a little while. I know he's well thought of in some circles, and he might be one of those guys that you start hearing more and more about as maybe a late first round guy. I like the value of him in the second round where the 49ers are picking. It's a great spot for him. Be a nice fit. 3-tech, disruptive, athletic, explosive type of a defensive tackle. Crowd.
Yeah, so some of my notes, quick notes. I started off strong, stout, watching him against the run. I mean, he was holding up against double teams, fighting off that. He has a really good motor. All right, then I said quick hands. You start seeing some of those pass rush moves, some of the hands that he has, and he was super active with that. I thought he was sudden, he was twitchy. Now again, these are some of the things a lot of times when I'm watching the games, I'll watch it and I'll go back through or I'll watch more games to see, do those things remain true. And then I said this: are we sure he's a second rounder? Because he looks more like a first round guy to me. Now, I'm watching the Arkansas game. I felt like he was doing very well, especially early on. As it got later in the game, the score was way out of hand. Ole Miss was just clobbering Arkansas. I thought his motor and a lot of what I saw from him early started to kind of die down. Not the same motor, not the same kind of pass rush moves, not splitting the double teams. Like he wasn't doing all the things he did early. So it's like, okay, did the energy just kind of die down because, hey, we're just clobbering this team and really I'm just trying to get out of Arkansas? I don't know. And I don't necessarily think that's a great thing if that is the reason for it. But early on, it was someone who just really jumped off the screen. Just they're trying to double him. He's splitting that. He's fighting through. He's grabbing in the ankle to make a tackle. He was doing a lot of those good things. Then I put on the LSU film, and I thought right away, playing a little high, playing a little too high. You see a guy who they'll line him up at 3-tech. They'll line him up as a kind of a 3-4 end, if you will. They'll line him up over the nose in a 0. And I thought in all those places that they lined him up, you saw, his ability to have value at various spots. And for a guy that is potentially under 300 pounds, but playing as a 0, I thought that added more value to him. Now, I don't think that's going to be his spot at the next level. He's definitely either a 3-4 in or a 3-tech type of guy. But I thought he was strong. I thought he was a disruptor. I thought he had a decent bull rush, although it wasn't a bull rush where he's getting that lineman into the lap of the quarterback immediately. But it's like as the quarterback's holding on to the ball, he's still moving and that guy is moving backwards. So, I thought he did a good job of that. But ultimately, some of the high-end traits that I felt like he had was something that made me feel like this is a guy that is potentially more of a first rounder as opposed to a second rounder where Dane Brugler has him going.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked at all if Nolan went higher than Mimbo in the end. I think they probably end up in a somewhat similar spot on a lot of teams' boards, maybe late 1, early 2. Wouldn't shock you probably to learn, Croc, that he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He was an Under Armour All-American and all that. And he was a dude and then transferred to Ole Miss. So I'm with you. Yeah, he would be someone that if he's there for you in the second round, it would feel good knowing that going into the first round, because then you could go offensive line, you could go defensive end, knowing that you're going to get a that quality of a defensive tackle waiting for you in the second round? Will that player be there for the 49ers in the second round? I don't know. So that's interesting.
He's the guy that the 49ers need, right? When you think of Hargraves, like it almost feels like, and Hargraves was fairly productive for the 49ers, but it was just a little up and down where, he would kind of disappear at times. The thought of what you would want Nolan to be at the next level is what you wanted to get out of Hargraves. Now, is he going to be a double-digit sack guy like we've seen at different times in Hargraves' career? I don't know about that. But if you're just talking about someone who, hey, he's not really getting shoved around in the run game, he's doing a really good job of kind of holding down that anchor, taking on double teams. He does have some pass rush moves, and he can kind of slice in there at times. Quick feet, quick hands. He's active. Those were things where it's like, oh, well, yeah, that's what you wanted to see from Hargraves. And you didn't quite see that at least consistently. But like you said, feel more comfortable more later first round. But I will be excited to see where other people have him going, because he can maybe be like what Johnny Newton, right? Those guys last year where we knew that they were kind of fringe first rounders. Where would they go? But I like him. He jumped out more than Newton. You were higher on Newton than I was, but
I like Newton a lot. Nolan's more juiced up probably than Newton. Newton's a really athletic guy. I think there's probably more raw tools to work with Walter Nolan than there was Johnny Newton last year. And so it's hard to see a guy like that fall out of the first round when you got that the high end, traits that Walter Nolan has, especially when you get into the late 20s and then those clean first round players aren't on the board, even if you don't have a clean first round grade on them. I bet some teams do have a first round grade on him. And who knows? He might shock everybody and go. He calls himself Aaron Donald, by the way, the next Aaron Donald. Like he's a confident dude, and that's the way he envisions himself, being able to move around and do a lot of things and be super disruptive. I don't know if he's the next Aaron Donald, but he's a pretty juiced up guy first round. It wouldn't shock me at all to see him go in the first round.
I don't even know if Aaron Donald knew he was the next Aaron Donald when he was drafted. What was it, 13th overall or around there?
Like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even think Aaron Donald thought he was that. But even then, Aaron Donald, you kind of use some of the words that describe Aaron Donald coming out. Now, he wasn't the longer prospect, but juiced up. That's a word that you keep using for Nolan. And I think that was a way that you could describe Aaron Donald when he was coming out of Pitt.
Yep. Swing for the fences. Do you want a defensive tackle that could be a monster, or do you want a guy who's probably better guard than a tackle? More excited about the Nolan pick, especially in the second round, than Armand Mimbo in round one. So that is Dane Brugler's mock 2.0. Let us know what you think at BD Peacock at Crocky 209 about those two prospects. Next, some coaching hires starting to happen around the NFL, Croc, and I have a feeling now that the divisional round is over, only 3 teams left. We're going to see some really furious coaching hires. Will the 49ers be one of those? Next. Today's episode of Lockdown 49ers presented by PrizePicks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of the final weeks of the football action. Only 3 more games left. We've got Championship Sunday, and then the big game a couple weeks later, and that is it. And that's where PrizePicks comes in, because if you love football, you want a chance to win real money while watching the games, and your team is out of it, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With PrizePicks, it's simple. You pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns, and for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make picks in as little as 60 seconds. You can boost your payouts. If you want to cash out quickly, you can. PrizePicks has you covered. So here's a special offer for our Locked On listeners. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks and the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. Run your game. Ben Johnson is going to Chicago. So Ben Johnson, staying in the division, is going to leave the Detroit Lions, and the former offensive coordinator of the now out of it Detroit Lions, shockingly losing in the first round first round for them, second round of the playoffs, home field advantage throughout, and that is gone, beaten by the rookie that comes in on the road to beat you in your house. So Ben Johnson is out, and now the head coach of the Chicago Bears, it looks like. I don't know if that's confirmed. It sounds like that is the direction it's going to go. And interesting there with his choice to stay in the division. He obviously likes Ryan Poles as the GM and thinks they're building something, and he thinks he can do something with a quarterback in Caleb Williams. So maybe it had something to do with who he lost to in the playoffs, and be like, I want one of those young, super talented quarterbacks to work with and build my new program with. So Ben Johnson, the head coach of the Chicago Bears, and one potential candidate for the 49ers, the defensive coordinator, Jeff Ulbrich, is now going to Atlanta to be the defensive coordinator there, which is an interesting one because Raheem Morris is a defensive guy. And is Morris going to give up the play calling duties to Jeff Ulbrich, or was he already not calling the plays? Or is he going to still call the plays and Jeff Ulbrich's just going to be defense coordinator in title like Kyle Shanahan's assistants are with his offense?
I don't think so, especially not with the 49ers looking heavily for a defensive coordinator and a guy where it'll be actually your defense. Well, I guess kind of. I mean, we always talk about Kyle Shanahan being the real defensive coordinator and running his defense, and maybe that's scaring some guys away. Having to adopt a different system than what they ideally want to run. It's like, well, if you guys are going to change up how I do things, I'll never forget Wilkes. And it was like, I don't know, preseason or week 3, and he's like, yeah, I'm still learning the defense. It's like, the hell? Like that's not for a guy that is a defensive guy for a living, and that's what he does. And it's like I go somewhere and I have to learn how they want me to do things. That's difficult. That's difficult to do. So I don't know if that's scaring some people off, guys like Jeff Ulbrich. I do know the 49ers kind of waiting to see what happens with Robert Saleh. Saleh just got a second interview with Jacksonville where he spent some time coaching linebackers, so he's familiar with those guys. He may be someone that they like. I thought they may go more the offensive route, especially with their quarterback, but it looks like, hey, it didn't work with Doug Peterson going that route. Didn't work with going with a guy like Urban Meyer. Maybe to go a little bit better with a guy like Robert Saleh, who just had a terrible situation in New York. And I think that's the part when everybody focuses on the wins and losses for these coaches, but sometimes these coaches, you got to take these jobs like and kind of strike while the iron is hot. And he may have had an opportunity to go to Detroit first, right? But he took the New York job and it's like, okay, I have this general manager, and the moment I step in and I get hired, I have to draft this Zach Wilson kid, number 2 overall, that is getting hyped up to the moon. And then that doesn't go well. Then it's like, okay, then I have to bring in, and I said he had to bring in, I mean, his GM is like, hey, let's go get Aaron Rodgers. And now Aaron Rodgers shakes things up and makes you bring on this offense coordinator and sign these receivers. And then things don't go well. And all of a sudden it kind of spirals out of control, and Rodgers is hurt. So you have to play a whole year without him. And now he's kind of a shell of himself. And it just was a disaster for him. And I hope for Robert Saleh, because I do think that he is a good football coach. And I think some other people may think he's a little bit over his head. I think he's a good football coach, and in the right situation, I think he could do well. But I don't know if it's Jacksonville as long as Balky's there. And I think Balky's still there, right?
Yeah, and
I'm not touching Jacksonville with Balky there.
No,
I don't care how much I want to be a head coach.
I mean, I think Ben Johnson just told us that. It's like, I'll go. I know the Bears have been not the greatest organization in recent history, but he said, yeah, I'll go to Chicago. I don't want any part of that Jacksonville Jaguars job. And so I think there's a very real chance that Robert Saleh gets that Jacksonville Jaguars job. And from the looks of it, like the 49ers aren't interviewing a bunch of guys, a defensive coordinator either. So it's the only official requests and interviews that I've seen reported. And I'm looking at it right now. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah. So Matt Mayoko, as of Monday, it's Robert Saleh, Deshae Townsend, and in-house Brandon Staley. So they didn't even interview Jeff Ulbrich. They haven't interviewed Lou Anarumo, to my knowledge. They haven't interviewed Dennis Allen. So it really feels like, and I don't know if this is the case, maybe there's been some interviews that just haven't been reported yet, but it really looks like they're waiting on Robert Saleh, and if they don't get him, they're okay with just elevating Brandon Staley from within, because there's not a lot of urgency on the 49ers side, and they're not interviewing anybody else right now. That's the vibe I get.
Staley?
Doesn't it feel like that? Like, what else are they doing? You're not going to go interview Lou Anarumo, this longtime defensive coordinator. You're not going to go interview Dennis Allen or anybody that runs a different scheme. You're just going to wait on Saleh. If he goes and gets a head coach job, you're going to go with Brandon Staley. or maybe they love Deshae Townsend. I don't know, but they haven't interviewed anybody else.
Man, that yeah, I don't know how to feel. Look, with the 49ers, one thing that they've kind of lived off of is in this short period of time, right? I think Kyle has coached 8 years now. He has had so much success. Like there's 4 years of legit winning, going to conference championship game, going to multiple Super Bowls. So it's hard to question their methods and their philosophy and how they go about hiring coaches. I think they've done a terrific job of finding guys, but as of late, it just kind of seems a little out of sorts. And I'm not putting this season on just solely to just coordinating. But gosh, I mean, after the Wilkes thing, and I thought he was kind of, I didn't like the way he was fired just because it felt like, I think he's a good coach. But now you're forcing him to do things that make him not him, right? If I said, hey, Peacock, we're going to do Locked On, but I want you to be Colin Cowherd instead of Brian Peacock. It's like, you wouldn't know how to do that as well as Colin Cowherd. That's not your thing.
I could do that all day long. I just don't want to do that.
So? You think so?
No. I won't put it like that.
Maybe we should do that for an episode.
I want to do it like that, but that would be fun to do an episode where we don't even tell the listeners. We just kind of change personas, and it's like, all right, here we go. We're Cowherd and Stephen A. Smith. Let's go. And see,
we'll do that this offseason.
Listeners like, what the hell are you guys talking about on Wednesday? That was weird.
Oh man, yeah. Colin Cowherd. See, first of all, I love Colin Cowherd probably more than most. Not so much the takes, but the way that he delivers his content, like the way he delivers his takes.
He's a pro.
Yeah, job. It's just when you talk every single day for 3 hours a day on the radio or on TV, you're bound to have some wonky stuff that people will never forget that you said it.
Yeah, I always question with a lot of people that have some really, and look, they're professionals and they're really good at laying it out there. I just question the legitimacy of what if they believe what they're saying or they know, like they're basically in a lot of cases, and Cowherd has definitely this sometimes where he's an actor playing an analyst on TV, and he does not. It's on the script, and he wrote the script for himself, but he doesn't really believe what he's saying. And I think there's a lot of that from a lot of people, and I really, really try hard not to do that.
Yeah, I've listened to Colin Cowherd talk like USC, college football. Like if you, especially like when you hear him on the pod, like on the volume, as opposed to on ESPN or on the Herd or whatever, Fox Sports Net, whatever that's on, it is kind of different. Just his what he's talking about, how he's delivering it. It's not super like hot takey. It just sounds like someone working through some thoughts, as opposed to having to be more entertaining for television purposes.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people you have to try to figure out a way to distinguish between the two. So if you're like, I don't like Colin Cowherd, I would suggest first listen to Locked On 49ers first and foremost, but listen to him more in podcast form as opposed to the Herd form, because I think those are kind of different guys a little bit. And I think you get that a lot from TV guys because they want you. Everybody gets so mad at these TV guys, and it's like, no, they're telling us like we have to pick a side. We can be on the same side and have the same thoughts, but for TV purposes, it's not fun seeing guys, get along all the time. It's not fun seeing guys, having the same thoughts on everything. You got to take a total opposite side of this, and I think that can make for some interesting takes for sure. That people they never forget that.
It's debate club. Yeah, you ever have debate class in college, and it's like you're arguing this point, you're arguing this point. I don't care if you believe it. Go, convince me. Right? You become a lawyer more than anything at that point. And that's what a lot of the debate shows are, because you got to have each side or else it doesn't work. Some updates here, Croc, coaching updates. It's looking like Dennis Allen is one of the leading candidates, if not the leading candidate, to join Ben Johnson as his defensive coordinator with the Chicago Bears. That is the latest update there. And it looks like the Indianapolis Colts are hiring former Bengals defensive coordinator and veteran coordinator Lou Anarumo as their defensive coordinator. So talking about veteran guys that were potentially candidates I would have thought for the San Francisco 49ers are looking like they might be off the market. So maybe it is down to Robert Saleh and Brandon Staley for Kyle Shanahan as his defensive coordinator.
Yeah. And that's on Kyle. You know, he put his eggs in one basket, and you got to hope that, I mean, you want to see Robert Saleh, do well and get hired and get another opportunity to be a head coach. But if you're Kyle Shanahan, you're like, I kind of hope he doesn't get this job, because I would much rather have him, in the Bay Area at least for 1 year, to where we can like legit figure this out, as if they didn't have enough time. I mean, they had a lot of time to kind of figure this whole thing out right now. Who did not think that Nick Sorensen was going to get fired? Like, I think everybody felt that.
And well, here's the funny thing is, what will our show be tomorrow if it turns out Saleh gets the Jacksonville Jaguars job and Brandon Staley gets elevated to defensive coordinator of the 49ers, and then Nick Sorensen just gets the special teams coordinator job? Would that be the worst possible scenario for the 49ers, just because they didn't bring really anything else in to add value to the organization from a coordinator perspective?
I think right away the fan base, it would have to be kind of a wait and see type thing, but I don't think the fan base would be too kind to that.
Yeah, wouldn't be exciting.
I think they want fresh face, fresh. If it's Robert Saleh, it's like, cool, we had some good years with Robert Saleh.
But
I don't think the fan base would be able to buy into the thought of firing Nick Sorensen for Brandon Staley.
I'm sure we'll have more.
Staley when he was hired, just in a consulting role.
Right. Yeah. Some fans didn't even like that. More, I'm sure, coaching news coming tomorrow. We will have it covered for you every step of the way. We will be scouting the mock drafts and mocking the mock drafts in some cases, and doing our own scouting reports on our own prospects that we like for the San Francisco 49ers as we build our 2025 Locked On 49ers draft board. Stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Croc and I back tomorrow right here. Locked On 49ers.